Hi there, let's crochet purl. Grab your set and remove the lid. I'll actually use it to store the items I won't need. Here you've got the care instructions along with the yarn. Set aside the smaller yarn skeins for the moment. You'll need the hook and the blue yarn. In this little bag, you'll also find the stitch markers. You'll need those too. Set the stuffing aside. Now take the yarn, remove the label, and locate the yarn tail. Place the yarn ball inside the tin. This way the yarn will stay clean and unravel smoothly. It will also help you control the tension in the yarn. Okay, let's begin with the magic ring. I'll demonstrate a hands-only method, although there are plenty methods using a hook. To start off, take the yarn holding the yarn tail with your non-dominant hand and the working yarn with your dominant hand. Place the working yarn over the tail and pinch where they intersect. Now pull the working yarn out of the loop that you've just created and give this new loop a twist to form a cross at the base. Then pull the working yarn through this loop, tightening it until the knot is snug but not too tight. To test the magic ring, pull on the yarn tail, and if your ring tightens up, you've got it right. Ensure that the ring is not too big. This will make it easier to crochet into it. Now grab your hook and insert it into this large loop. To adjust the loop to the size of the hook, pull on the working yarn. The loop should be just the size of the tip of the hook so that it is easy to slide the hook through. To hold your yarn, turn your palm face up and position the yarn on your pinky and ring fingers. Fold the fingers passing the yarn behind and over the middle finger and the pointer. Keep the magic ring on the middle finger and secure the ring with your thumb, leaving space for the hook. Maintain tension in both the working yarn and the ring. In row 1, let's make 6 single stitches. Insert your hook into the ring under both of these strands and grab the working yarn from underneath. Pull the hook out of the ring, forming another loop on the hook that's about the same size as the previous one. Yarn over again, and this time twist the tip of the hook downwards and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. Now you've made your first single stitch. We got 5 more to do. Check the size of the loop on the hook and continue adding the stitches. Put your hook through the ring and grab the working yarn from underneath. Pull the hook out and yarn over again. Twist the tip of the hook and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. Repeat these steps to create 4 more single stitches. Maintain tension in both the working yarn and the ring in order to make it easier to crochet. Keep an eye on the size of the loop on the hook and the loops you're picking up. This way your stitches will be even in size. Once you're done with all 6 stitches, pull on the hook to make a larger loop. This will save our last stitch from falling apart. Here you can see we've got our 6 stitches all lined up. Each stitch has the shape of a V. The largest loop you pulled out with the hook is not considered a stitch. Now let's tighten the magic ring. Get the yarn tail out and pinch the last stitch in the ring. Pull on the yarn tail so that the ring tightens, but not all the way. You can count the stitches by the V's. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now find the second and the third stitch again and place a stitch marker into each one of those. Simply slide the stitch marker under both bars of the V and ensure you're not using the very first V at all. This is going to help you identify the stitches to put your hook through in round 2. Here is our row 1 with 6 single stitches. In round 2, we are going to have to make 6 increases. An increase is typically 2 single stitches made in the same stitch of the previous round. Increases are used to shape our project, and in our case, we need to start widening our circle to shape the head. Let's take a closer look at the formulas in crochet. SC means single crochet stitch. In row 1, you make 6 single stitches. In row 2, INC means increase. You make 6 increases and each increase is 2 stitches. So 6 times 2 equals 12 stitches for row 2. The number in the brackets tells you how many stitches you'll have by the end of the row. The formulas in row 1 and row 2 are relatively simple. However, more complex formulas exist. For example, let's look at row 3. The formula for row 3 reveals numbers within square brackets multiplied by another number, and the final number in the brackets indicates the stitches you should have at the end of the row. What's inside the brackets represents a sequence, which in this case is a single stitch followed by an increase. The sequence is then multiplied by 6, meaning you repeat this sequence 6 times to complete the row. As a result, you will get 18 stitches in that row. Get your yarn in working position, and in row 2 we need to make 6 increases. Put your hook under the first stitch, the one that's not marked. This can be tricky at times because this first stitch gets overly tight. Make sure you have 3 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pick up a loop. Yarn over again and pull the working yarn through both loops on the hook. This completes the first stitch of the second round. Mark the stitch with a stitch marker to indicate the starting point. Now let's proceed with the increase. Reinsert the hook into the same stitch where the first single crochet was made. Then create another single crochet in that same stitch. Always ensure that the loop you're picking up is of the same size as the loop on the hook. That completes our first increase. Now let's move on to the second stitch and work our second increase. Remove the stitch marker and put your hook under the V of the second stitch. Make a single crochet stitch. Remember to twist the tip of the hook to secure the yarn. Reinsert the hook into the same stitch and work another single stitch. Now that the second increase is complete, let's create the third one into the third stitch. Remove the stitch marker and insert your hook under the V of the third stitch. Work 2 single stitches into this stitch. Now we have completed 3 increases and have 3 more to do. Once you're done with row 2, pull out the hook. Count the stitches starting with the marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Before moving forward, let's ensure that our ring is nice and tight and there is no hole in the middle. To do that, find the yarn tail and pinch your project at the very center. Then pull on the yarn tail until the ring closes up. Once that's done, let's move on to the next row. Reinsert the hook into the loop, adjusting the loop to fit snugly around the hook. In row 3, follow a simple pattern of a single stitch followed by an increase. And make your first single crochet into the first stitch of the previous row. Once you're done with the first stitch, mark it with a stitch marker and move on to making an increase. Locate the next stitch and put your hook through it. Create a single crochet, then reinsert the hook back into the stitch and create another single crochet. This completes our increase. Repeat this sequence 5 more times. By the end of the row, you should have 18 stitches. Once you're done, pull out the hook and count the stitches starting with the stitch marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Make sure to always count the stitches after completing the round, especially if it involves increases. Identify the right side of your crochet project by the presence of only vertical bars. The wrong side will feature both vertical and horizontal bars, forming a distinct texture. You always want to hold your project with the right side facing you. When counting the stitches on the right side of your project, begin by locating the magic ring and the 6 single stitches in row 1. Next, you'll notice that the second row starts with a bump. Directly under this bump is the first stitch of the second round. The stitch corresponds to the hole under the V, similar to the hole under this V, but is the first stitch of the second round. We made an increase in this stitch, so you'll find that 2 posts trace back into this hole. And as you follow along the round, you'll encounter 5 more instances where 2 posts trace back into the same hole, indicating the 6 increases. The first stitch of the third round is a single stitch, so there's just 1 post tracing back into that hole. In the second stitch, you'll find that 2 posts are tracing back into that hole. This is the increase that we've made. Then again, a single stitch and an increase. A single stitch and an increase. By examining the right side of your project, you can accurately count the stitches. This method is essential for identifying any errors. If you discover that you have too few or too many stitches in a row, first identify the mistake by counting the posts. Then pinch the last correct stitch to keep it secure and carefully unravel all the stitches beyond it. Next, reinsert the hook into the small loop just above the stitch you've saved and proceed to complete the round correctly. In row 4, follow a pattern of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this pattern 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. Start by making the first single stitch and mark it with a stitch marker. Then follow along, creating another single stitch. And in the next stitch, crochet an increase. Repeat this sequence 5 more times, and by the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. And once you're done, count the stitches to ensure you have 24. In round 5, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 30 stitches. Count the stitches to ensure you have 30, and let's move on to the next round. In round 6, follow a sequence of 4 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 36 stitches. Remember to keep marking off the first stitch of every round. Count the stitches before moving forward. You should have 36. In round 7, follow a sequence of 5 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 42 stitches. Count the stitches before moving forward. In round 8, crochet 42 single stitches. Once you're done with round 8, set your crochet piece aside and do not cut off the working yarn. This piece is the outer part of the first half of the shell. We will now move on to crocheting the inner part of this half. It's important not to cut the working yarn because we will use this blue yarn to crochet the outer and inner parts together. Start making the inner part of the shell's half with a magic ring. In round 1, crochet 7 single stitches into the ring. Once you're done with making all of these 7 stitches, tighten the magic ring and move on to round 2. Round 2. In round 2, crochet 7 increases. By the end of the round, you should have 14 stitches. Remember to mark the first stitch with a stitch marker. Once you've completed all of the increases, count the stitches to confirm you've got 14 and tighten the magic ring. In round 3, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 7 times. By the end of the round, you should have 21 stitches. Before moving forward, count the stitches. In round 4, follow a sequence of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat the sequence 7 times, and by the end of the round, you should have 28 stitches. You want this piece to stay flat, so if you see it's curving, give it a gentle pull on the sides to flatten it out. Only after that, count the stitches and continue crocheting. In round 5, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 7 times. By the end of the round, you should have 35 stitches. Continue spreading the piece by gently pulling it on the sides so that it stays flat, and then count the stitches. In round 6, follow a sequence of 4 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat the sequence 7 times. By the end of the round, you should have 42 stitches. This is the final round for this piece. Pull on the sides to flatten it out as much as possible and count the stitches to ensure you've got exactly 42. To perform an invisible fasten off, cut the yarn leaving about a 5-inch yarn tail. Pull this yarn tail entirely through the last stitch. Remove the stitch marker and thread the tapestry needle with this yarn tail. Now skip the following stitch in the round and insert your needle under the stitch after that. Pull the yarn tail tightly and insert your needle back into the last stitch between the two top bars of it and through the back bar of the stitch. This way we create a fake stitch, ensuring that our fasten off is invisible. Now turn your work with the wrong side facing you and start pulling the needle through the back bars of the stitches, bringing your yarn tail closer to the center. Once that's done, tie the yarn tail from the magic ring together with this yarn tail. Cut off the excess yarn. Now let's crochet the two parts of the shell's half together. Ensure that the right sides face outward and the wrong sides stay inside. Each part has a rim of 42 stitches. You still have the blue working yarn attached to the outer part of the half. Insert your hook into the large loop on the outer part that you've pulled out in the last stitch and tighten this loop on the hook. Remove the stitch marker and put your hook through the next stitch in the round and grab the inner piece. Insert your hook through any stitch on the inner piece. Preferably start near the invisible fasten off on the inner piece. This aligns the starting points, making them easier to hide when assembling the shell. This way you have 4 loops on your hook, so 2 full stitches. Yarn over and complete a single stitch as usual. Insert the stitch marker under this stitch to mark it off as the first one. Continue by putting your hook through each next stitch on the outer part and the inner part. Ensure you're crocheting into every one of the 42 stitches along the round, attaching the 2 pieces together. Before fully closing off the round, you will need to insert some stuffing into this shell half. Now is the perfect time to add some stuffing. Pull a larger loop out to preserve the last stitch and insert the yarn tail inside the piece. Now grab the stuffing and gently spread it out to avoid any lumps. Put the stuffing inside the piece. Ensure not to overstuff it, as you want the white part to stay flat. Spread the stuffing with your finger, molding it to the shape of the shell half. Ensure the stuffing is not protruding through the opening and continue crocheting both parts together. Reinsert the hook and check the size of the loop. Once you're done, remove the hook and start squishing the piece to ensure that the stuffing inside is well molded to the shape. You want to keep the white part flat. Now proceed to perform an invisible fasten off. Cut the yarn leaving about a 5-inch yarn tail and pull this yarn entirely through the last stitch. Thread the tapestry needle with this yarn tail and remove the stitch marker. Skip the next stitch and insert your needle under the next one. Then guide the needle between the top bars of the last stitch and under the back bar of it. Tighten the stitch to ensure it looks like one of the regular stitches in the round. Then hide the yarn by guiding the needle through the posts of the stitches. Around 4 or 5 posts will do the trick. Next, insert the needle between the white and blue parts of the shell half and out through any stitch on the piece. Cut the yarn tail and use the tapestry needle to push the cut yarn inside the piece to hide it completely. Clear up any residue of the yarn and your piece is done. Repeat the entire process to create another half of the shell. To create the ruffle edging, place a stitch marker in any stitch along the rim and count 21 stitches starting with a stitch marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Pinch the 21st stitch and put the stitch marker right under it. Ignore the stitches that you just counted, including the ones with the stitch markers. We will not be using these stitches. Work into the remaining stitches. There should be exactly 21, starting with the first stitch after the second marker and counting further along the round. You don't have to mark the stitches as I'm doing here. You can simply start crocheting into any stitch of the round. However, I like to add stitch markers as stoppers so that you start in the first stitch after the marker and finish in the last stitch before the marker. This way you don't have to count the stitches while crocheting. Once you've selected the stitches you're going to crochet into, flip your work so the blue side is facing you and set it aside. Now grab the white yarn and create a slip knot. Hold the yarn tail with your non-dominant hand and the working yarn with your dominant hand. Fold the working yarn over the yarn tail and pass the working yarn through the loop you've created. Then tighten the loop. Once you've made the slip knot, put the loop onto the hook and tighten it to be slightly larger than the tip of the hook. Set the slip knot aside. Grab the half of the shell that you were working on and insert your hook into the next stitch after the one marked with the stitch marker. Then put the slip knot onto the hook and guide the loop of the slip knot right through the stitch. Now create a chain stitch to secure the white yarn on the piece. Simply yarn over and pull the working yarn through the loop on the hook. This is called a chain stitch. Create another chain stitch in the same manner. These two chain stitches will act as the first post, like the first stitch of this round. Now let's start making the half double crochets. You will need to make 2 of those into each of the 21 stitches you've selected. To create a half double crochet, yarn over first and keep this yarn strand on the hook. Then insert the hook into the stitch where you fixed the yarn with the chain stitches. Yarn over and pick up a loop. Now you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over again and pull the working yarn through all 3 loops on the hook. Finish this stitch with a chain stitch by yarning over and pulling the working yarn through the loop on the hook. This completes our half double crochet. We already have 2 posts tracing back into the first stitch. Now let's work 2 half double crochets into the next stitch. Yarn over, keep this yarn strand on the hook and put your hook through the next stitch. Yarn over and pick up a loop. Then yarn over again and pull the working yarn through all 3 loops on the hook. Create a chain stitch to complete the first half double crochet. Then work another half double crochet into this same stitch. Continue working 2 half double crochets into each of the remaining 19 stitches. Once you're done, pull the hook out and let's hide the yarn tails. Cut the yarn, leaving a 5-inch yarn tail. Pull this yarn tail all the way through the last stitch. Remove the stitch markers thread the tapestry needle with this yarn tail. Now guide the needle into the post of the last stitch and then insert the needle under a few more posts along the round. And insert it between the white and blue parts, guiding it out on the white side of the project. You can also create a fixing stitch by inserting the needle into the row directly below or above, mimicking a stitch post. You might encounter pieces of stuffing coming out as you pull the needle through. Leave the yarn tail here at the moment and let's move to the other yarn tail. Insert the needle between the white and blue parts right where the knot is and thread the yarn tail through the needle. Guide the needle out through the same stitch where the other yarn tail is emerging. Now tie both yarn tails together twice. Cut the excess yarn. Now use the tapestry needle to push the knot inside the piece. Now let's make the tail for our shell and assemble the shell by attaching both halves together. We need to ensure that the ruffle edging is aligned. To do that, count 7 stitches away from the ruffle edging and insert a stitch marker into the 7th stitch. Then count another 7 stitches along the round and insert a stitch marker into the 8th stitch, leaving 7 stitches between the markers. If you count starting with the stitch marker, you should have 7 stitches until you reach the ruffle edging again. And between the stitches that you marked with the stitch markers, you will have 7 untouched stitches, which you will crochet through. Now grab the other half of the shell and count 7 stitches away from the ruffle edging while the white part is facing away from you. Insert the stitch marker into the 7th stitch. Now align the two halves using the stitch markers as a reference point. The 7 stitches between the markers should form pairs. Set the pieces aside for now and create a slip knot with a new strand of blue yarn. Ensure that the loop is not too large. Set the slip knot aside and grab the two halves of the shell. Insert your hook through the stitches right after the stitch markers so you have two full stitches on your hook. Place the slip knot onto the hook and pull it through both stitches. Create a chain stitch to secure the yarn in place. Then make another chain stitch. These two chain stitches will act as the first stitch of the tail. Continue making half double crochets into the next 5 pairs of stitches. After each half double crochet, make a chain stitch and move on to the next pair of stitches. Once you're done with all 7 pairs of stitches, pull the hook out. Cut the working yarn leaving a 5-inch tail and pull this yarn entirely through the last stitch. Check that the shell is opening correctly and remove all of the stitch markers. Thread the tapestry needle with the yarn tail and hide it by weaving the needle through the stitches below the last stitch. Ensure the last stitch of the tail doesn't curve inwards and don't overly tighten the stitch. Insert the needle back through the last half double crochet and then through the adjacent stitch on the shell. Guide the needle out through any stitch on the shell. Next, reposition the second yarn tail. Insert the needle where the knot is and guide it out through any stitch. Now thread the yarn through the tapestry needle and pull it out of the shell. Create a fixing stitch by inserting the needle into the row just above where it exited, mimicking a stitch post. Guide the needle out where the other yarn tail is emerging. Tie both yarn tails together twice. Cut the excess yarn and hide the knot inside the shell using a tapestry needle. In the second row of the tail, you will be working into the holes right between your half double crochets. The very first hole is tiny because it's between the chain stitches you made when attaching the yarn and the first real half double crochet. So this is the first hole, the second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Locate this hole and insert your hook into it. Grab a new strand of yarn and make a slip knot. Put the slip knot onto the hook and pull the loop through this hole. Create a chain stitch to secure the yarn. Then add 2 extra chain stitches which will serve as the first half double crochet in this row. After that, proceed to create a half double crochet stitch into the next hole. Yarn over and put the hook through the next hole. Yarn over again, pick up a loop, yarn over again, and pull the working yarn through all 3 loops on the hook. Create a chain stitch to complete this half double crochet and proceed with creating another half double crochet into this same hole. Now crochet 2 half double crochets into every hole along the rim of the tail. Once you have completed all of the stitches, remove the hook and cut the working yarn, leaving a 5-inch yarn tail. Pull the yarn tail all the way through the last stitch and proceed to hide it. Thread the tapestry needle with one of the yarn tails. Insert the needle under the posts of the half double crochets and guide it out somewhere in the middle of the tail. Next, thread the needle with the other yarn tail and match it up with the first one. Now tie the yarn tails together twice. Ensure not to pull too tight so that the tail doesn't deform. After tying the yarn tails together, After tying the yarn tails together, thread one of them through the needle and guide the needle through several more stitches. Cut the excess yarn and repeat the same with the other yarn tail, guiding it out to the other side. And finally, the shell is complete. Start making the pearl with a magic ring. Place the working yarn over the yarn tail and pinch where they intersect. Guide the working yarn through the loop and twist it to form a cross at the base. Then guide the working yarn through the new loop that you've created and pull it until the knot is tight. Insert your hook and adjust the loop to the size of the hook. Adjust the size of the ring too, and move on to round 1. In round 1, crochet 6 single stitches into the ring. In round 2, crochet 6 increases. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. Remember to mark off the very first stitch of the round. Count the stitches before moving forward. You should have 12. In round 3, follow a sequence of a single stitch followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. By this time, your piece may start curving. Adjust it, ensuring that the right side faces outward. Count the stitches before moving forward. You should have 18. In round 4, follow a sequence of 2 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. In round 5, crochet 24 single stitches. In round 6, follow a sequence of 3 single stitches followed by an increase. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 30 stitches. In round 7, crochet 3 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 24 stitches. Start by crocheting the 3 single stitches. A decrease combines 2 stitches into one to shape our project. Each stitch has a back loop and a front loop. Insert your hook under the front loop of the next stitch, then do the same with the following stitch. You should have 3 loops on your hook, with the back loops remaining untouched. Yarn over and pull the working yarn through the first 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over again and pull the working yarn through the remaining 2 loops on the hook. This completes our decrease. Now locate the next full stitch and crochet 3 single stitches starting with this one. Now make a decrease. Repeat this sequence 4 more times. Before moving forward, count the stitches. You should have 24. In round 8, crochet 24 single stitches. Now is the perfect time to put in the eyes. The eyes come with these sparkly pads which make them shine, and the backings which you use to lock the eyes in place. Now let's find the position for the eyes. Grab your piece and locate the magic ring and the first 6 single stitches. Ensure that the bump of the second row is turned to the side, then count 5 rows starting with the first one. Insert your hook into any hole between rows 5 and 6 and widen the hole using the hook. Then grab a stitch marker and insert it into this hole as a placeholder. Double check to confirm that the placeholder is between rows 5 and 6. Now count 3 holes to the side and insert your hook into the 4th hole. Use another stitch marker as a placeholder for the second eye. You should have 4 stitches between the eyes. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now replace one of the stitch markers with an eye. Turn your piece inside out and grab the backing. Place the backing on the post of the eye and press it firmly to ensure it clicks in. Once that is done, replace the second stitch marker with an eye. In round 9, crochet 2 single stitches followed by a decrease. Repeat this sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 18 stitches. In round 10, crochet a single stitch followed by a decrease. Repeat the sequence 6 times. By the end of the round, you should have 12 stitches. Before completing the last round, let's stuff our pearl. Grab some stuffing and gently spread it with your fingers so that there are no lumps, and start stuffing the pearl. Ensure the stuffing is spread evenly throughout the pearl and that none of it is popping out. In round 11, crochet 6 decreases. By the end of the round, you should have only 6 stitches left. Once you're done, remove the hook and let's move on to fastening off the pearl. You can also gently press on the pearl to shape it and evenly distribute the stuffing inside. To fasten off the pearl, cut the working yarn, leaving a 3 to 5 inch yarn tail, and pull this yarn tail all the way through the last stitch. Remove the stitch marker, get your tapestry needle, and thread it with the yarn tail. Locate the next stitch in the round and slide your needle from the inside to the outside through the front loop of the stitch. Do the same with the remaining 5 stitches, always guiding your needle from the inside to the outside. Once that is done, place your thumb on the center of the piece and pull the yarn tail to tighten the center. Then guide your needle into the stitch right below the yarn tail and out through any stitch on the pearl. Create a fixing stitch by inserting the needle into the row above or below just one stitch away, mimicking the post of the stitch, and pull your needle out through any stitch. Don't worry if you catch the yarn tail that's hidden inside, simply pull it out through the same stitch and cut it later. You can create another fixing stitch just in case, or tie the yarn tails as usual before cutting them off. If you created multiple fixing stitches, you can simply cut off the working yarn, confident it will stay secure. Push the remaining yarn inside the pearl and your pearl is almost done. To add a smile, get a tapestry needle threaded with a short strand of white yarn. Locate the stitches where you want the smile to be. Insert the needle through the stitch where the smile should start and now through the stitch where it should end. Tie the yarn tails together, but don't make it overly tight so that the smile stays wide. Then thread both yarn tails through the needle and insert them back into the stitch where the needle first came out. Use the tapestry needle to shape the smile, and once you're happy with it, cut off the yarn tails and push the remaining yarn inside the purl. Once you're happy with the smile, place your purl inside the shell. Congratulations, your purl is complete.